Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on voiceamerica.com, America's Voice. We are in our, I think, 23rd or 24th year here. I've done much radio and much TV and much media in my career, but this is the longest lasting place that I have been, and I'm so excited that I have the longevity here with the amazing guests that I have on each week. And this is the program that shows you how to turn your obstacles into opportunities and your problems into solutions and make your dreams come true. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite subjects because I'm moving up to that group at some point. We're talking about positive aging, but specifically, we're talking about centenarians, people who reach 100 years old. And before I introduce my guest, I want to share this because this is very true and very personal. When I was in my 30s, I just had this vision that I wanted to live until I was at least 100. And in those days, I read about the people who were living the longest. In those days, they were talking about the Hunses. Now they're talking about different groups of people. And for the rest of my life until now, I've really been following a lot of the principles, not all of them, but a lot of them. And it has really held me in good stead. And so I plan to live to 100 and beyond. And the goal is to be healthy. So, having said that, let me interview and introduce this incredible guest I'm so excited about. The book is called The Big 100, The New World of Super Aging by William J. Kole, by Bill Kole. Journalist Bill Kole, reluctant but newly minted member of AARP, explores the looming area of super aging and how it has changed our society. By 2050, the world's centenarian population, those aged 100 or more, will increase eightfold. Half of today's 5-year-olds can expect to live to 100. It's going to upend everything we thought we knew about healthcare, personal finance, retirement, politics, and more, whether we're 18 or we're 51 or 81. This tectonic demographic shift will affect us all. The Big 100 confronts readers with both the brightness and potential bleakness of a fate few of us thought would be possible. Bill Kole guides us on this journey into our future, an optimistic but sometimes fraught exploration of super aging as the grandson of a centenarian. The question is, how long can we live? How long should we live? And what happens when 65 is a mere half-life? The Big 100 shares with us the most pressing questions of super aging and offers a glimpse of reality that awaits us, our children, and our grandchildren. Welcome, Bill Kole. I'm thrilled to have you on this program.
It's my pleasure and privilege, Patricia. Thanks for having me on.
And you live in the state that I'm in. So there you go.
Yes, and
And I
Rhode Island is actually doing pretty well in terms of producing centenarians. When you look at a ranking of the U.S. states, we're right up there. I think we're around number 4. Hawaii it produces most of the centenarians per capita.
Interesting.
And then Southern New England has a pretty good showing. Connecticut is up in there, Rhode Island. So if your desire is to live to 100, you're probably in the right place.
So here's my question. Is it because we have medical breakthroughs? Is it because we have technological breakthroughs? Is it because we have both? Or is it also something else? What's the reason that we're living longer?
It's a combination of things. Honestly, it is very technologically driven. You mentioned at the outset that statistic, which I find really startling, that uh, you know, half of all 5-year-olds alive right now are projected
Yeah.
to live to 100. That comes from Stanford University's Center on Longevity,
Wow.
and that's based on you know the the fact that we're doing a better job of handling the things that kill us. And even cancers are no longer a death sentence like they used to be just half a century ago. So we're doing better with that. And
And we
then,
have
the
stem
other,
cell research. We have stem cell research. We're already injecting people with stem cells, and it's helping them live longer. We're going to be able to replace organs and build them in labs. And that's just the medical side. What about all of the technology that will help people with devices so that they can live longer?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, in the near future. I mean, uh, gerontologists who are scientists who study aging are imagining a different kind of a world for us as we age. In not so many years from now, maybe wearing sort of like a smart skin that will uh, think of it as like a leotard or tights or something like that that will monitor our bodily functions. Honestly, if you have an Apple Watch, that thing is powerful. That's already, keeping track of your heart rate and so forth. But getting back to what's really driving this, yes, the technology for sure is a big piece of it. But part of it is just demographic. Uh, the baby boom generation, my generation,
Mine
uh,
too.
is is okay. Well, there you go. Cheers. Okay, boomer. uh, we there's a lot of us, and the oldest of us are now in our late 70s, and so in the next 25 years, the oldest and fittest of us are going to start hitting triple digit ages, and that's why, the number of centenarians in just 25 years from now is projected to be in the United States 3.7 million, which is the entire population of Connecticut and about the size of Los Angeles. If you could imagine the city of Los Angeles made up entirely of 100-year-olds. And
Mm.
then just 50 years beyond that, in 2100, and some of your younger listeners will see this day, um, they're actually projecting 25 million centenarians. So this is a huge demographic, influence,
And
and
Bill,
so
let
the
me
combination, yeah, the
ask you something.
combination is
It is a combination, but there's also another factor we haven't talked about yet. In that pool of all these people who will be 100, people are going to work longer. I mean, I'm an early baby boomer, and I have no plans of retiring because I love what I do. And I also think I will tell you that the people that I know that are older, my age or older, who look fabulous, and people say, "Are you kidding? You're that age." I mean, I get that as well. Not bragging, but I do. Why is that? Because we are doing what we love. We are keeping our brains active. We are learning new things all the time. And so I think that that's another factor that we're not talking about that much, but that we will be working in our 70s and 80s, and some
absolutely.
people in
Look,
their 90s.
well, if you're going to live into your 100s, you're not going to retire at 65. You're
Right.
absolutely right. You're going to have to, continue working to earn income into your 80s probably before you can really start thinking about, throttling back. And that's problematic because not everybody is going to be able to do that easily. I mean, I'm a journalist. You're, a journalist and a podcaster, and the work you can do your work in an air conditioned room, and you don't have to
Right.
lift heavy things. Think of
Right.
all the millions of people who are in construction or agriculture or
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
landscaping or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not realistic to think of them working that late into their lives. But what comes to mind when we contemplate the 100-year life is, where the heck am I going to find enough money to pay a century's worth of bills? So there's a real kind of tension there.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing that's a problem is when you start getting into assisted livings or CCRCs or nursing homes, we're looking at a lot of money every month. And unless that comes down, right, so that the average, if you will, person who's not making 150 or 200 or even 100 a year can afford it. Because now those people that can afford it really, I just talked with someone that told me that they went to a CCRC, which is an assisted living and a community and a nursing home all in one. You have to have $1.5 million in order to apply to get in there today.
And this is another sad reality, is that the average retirement savings uh, in the United States is like $30,000. I mean, which is nothing, right? I mean, it's really a crisis. And I think that as we, I mentioned this super aging era that we are hurtling into, um, is honestly going to require a look at our policies, a look at, a rethink of how we approach aging, about how we approach federal benefits. I mean, Medicare doesn't cover nursing home care, how are the people going to afford it? I mean, it can run up to $8,000 a month.
Yeah. So these are things we have to look at. But the good news, as you said, is certainly with all of our medical breakthroughs, right? We can live longer, better with our technological breakthroughs. And I think people are more health conscious today. I mean, I'm doing workshops in corporations, Bill, on just healthy living and positive aging. Things that that we know are common sense, but we're teaching this in corporations now to people to say, yeah, well, maybe I'm 40, maybe I'm 50, but I've got to be looking at what I'm eating, my exercise, um, my sleep patterns. I've got to be looking at the friends I'm around. We never talked about
Mhm.
this before. So I think the awareness is higher.
It absolutely is. And I think that in general, we're doing a decent job. I will put a caveat on that, though.
Go ahead.
Our life expectancy in the United States pales in comparison to much of the world. When you look at global rankings of life expectancy, we're we're in the upper third, but right at the bottom of the upper third. There are third world countries that are doing better than we are, and that's problematic. I mean, right now our average life expectancy, of course, it took a hit during COVID, and then it's basically regained that lost ground, but it's about 77.5 years across the sexes. Women are their life expectancy in the United States is about 81 years, and for men it's 75. And there are a lot of countries doing much better than that.
Well, when you say that, the first thing that pops into my head is blue zones. And I interviewed Dan Buettner a couple of times years ago, and is a National Geographic explorer who went around the world, and a bicyclist who found the 5 healthiest places on the planet where people are living to 100 and beyond. And then he did a documentary, which I'm sure you've seen. One's
Yes.
Loma Linda, California, which is interesting because Loma Linda is in the heart of it's near a big city. I think it's near LA. But because it's Seventh-day Adventists and they live in a very specific way, and they're very spiritually oriented and they really pay attention to the environment, they were able to create that. And his whole theory now is that you can do this in any place. If you have the right ingredients and the people who are willing, you can create these blue zones. So it's very interesting. Your comments about that.
Yeah, it is very interesting. The blue zones, however, are a bit misunderstood. The first thing I would say is that we tend to think of them. First of all, let's remind our listeners what the blue zones are. There are five. There's only
Right,
one in the United States, as you
right.
mentioned, Loma Linda, California. The others are Okinawa, Japan,
Mm-hmm,
Ikaria,
mm-hmm,
Greece,
mm-hmm.
Sardinia, Italy, and the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. And these are places where we've been told um, that they're almost like centenarian factories, that they produce many more people living to 100. It's not true. What we can say about the blue zones is that they do have large populations of people living healthy lives into their 90s, and we can learn a lot from them. So the blue zones have much to teach us. But there has been some studies done, and you may have seen some headlines that recently. I was one of the first in this book, The Big 100, to confront some of the myths about blue zones through research done in the UK, where they looked at how the record keeping is very sloppy in a lot of these blue zones, and the numbers don't always add up. In part because, for example, someone dies and
Right.
their relatives, these are poor places in some instances, continue receiving their government checks and so forth, and so there's on paper, these people are living ages that they're not, so it's a little complicated. But
Yeah.
all that being said, we can learn so much from the blue zones.
Well, that's how I felt. I felt that when I watched the documentary and I watched the agility of these people and the joy and the happiness, that's real. No matter what the statistics are, these people are real. And we don't see that so
Absolutely.
much in our country. We don't. We don't see this constant laughter and joy and family community where everybody sits around the table and we eat really just food from the farm and from our garden, which I guess most of us don't have one. But I mean, it was real. And I think that's inspiring. Even if we can't do those things, we can aspire to do some of them.
Well, you mentioned though that the Blue Zone organization is actually trying to create new blue zones, and they can. Why? Because they'll identify cities where there aren't enough trees, there isn't enough green space. The makeup of the city doesn't allow people to walk and get to shops and things on foot or cycling. And so by
Right,
adding bike lanes and planting trees and
right.
creating parks, they are able to actually, enhance the quality of life, and in so doing, uh, create longevity.
Exactly. We're going to take a break on that note. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Bill Cole more about his book, The Big 100, The New World of Super Aging. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you more about Bill and about his bio. He is an award-winning reporter, editor, former foreign correspondent who has reported from North America, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And we'll talk more about his incredible accomplishments when we come back after the break. You're listening to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on voiceamerica.com. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone, and we are back. We are talking about positive aging, and the name of the book is The Big 100, The New World of Super Aging by William J. Kole. And Bill is a native Rhode Islander, as I am. I'm not a native Rhode Islander. You're not a native Rhode Islander either, right?
Massachusetts originally.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there you go. I'm from Connecticut, so we're close. Now, let me tell you about Bill. I want to tell you more about him this time. William J. Kole is an award-winning reporter, editor, and former foreign correspondent who has reported from North America, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. A Massachusetts native, he studied journalism at Boston University and joined the Associated Press in Detroit, where he covered Dr. Jack Kevorkian, his suicide machine, and the spirited national conversation around individual end-of-life decisions. Later, as an AP correspondent based in Paris, Amsterdam, and Vienna, Bill covered some major international stories, including the crash that killed Princess Diana, the death of Pope John Paul II, and Kosovo's independence. He speaks French, Dutch, German, and English. Bill, who retired early in 2022 as AP's New England editor, is a former fellow in aging journalism at Columbia University in New York and the National Press Foundation in Washington, D.C. And he and his wife, children's book illustrator Terry Dionker Cole, live here in Rhode Island, and two children and two grandsons. So there you
Right.
go. There
Yeah.
you go.
Since you mentioned my bio, I should probably jump in and say that the sort of inspiration for this book, The Big 100, came from my time in Paris as a foreign correspondent for AP, when I told the world about Jeanne Calment, who lived 122 years and 164 days. And she is still the oldest person who ever lived whose age could be authenticated by records. And she was a hoot.
And you knew her.
She well, no, I just covered some press conferences with her, and but I was then unfortunately never able to sit down and interview her. But I wrote articles about her when she celebrated her 121st birthday, and at that point became the world's oldest living human. And talk about positivity. I mean,
Yeah, tell me about her. Let's talk about her for a
yeah,
minute.
yeah. Well, she was a very amusing person. She had a great sense of humor. She stopped wearing mascara because she laughed so much that she would cry off her mascara and it just made a mess. And
Yeah.
so she just stopped wearing eye makeup. She was a real hot ticket. She started taking fencing lessons at 85, and
Mm,
she didn't stop riding her bicycle until she turned 100.
mm.
She eventually was taught how to use a computer around her 120th birthday, and she set up a website. She recorded a rap album that was called Time's Mistress. That was the title of her
Did
rap
she
album.
have children and great grandchildren and great great grandchildren?
She had children and grandchildren. She had a tragic bit of a tragic life. Her husband died young in his 40s um, after having at a picnic. I think he ate some spoiled cherries and he died. So she was a widow for a very long time. And then her son was killed in a car wreck. So, trouble came her way, but she still managed to keep a very upbeat attitude. And my favorite quote from her, Patricia, was, "I only have one wrinkle and I'm sitting on it,"
Hmm.
which I think is hilarious.
You know, Bill, I've got to ask you this. It's a little off the subject, but I think it's very pertinent. You've traveled all over the world. You've covered all kinds of things from celebrity to non-celebrity. So, your attitude and your worldview is going to be very different from somebody who's led a more singular, if you will, life.
Mhm.
So, I guess my question is, how has all of your work changed your attitude? Or what has it done? Like, if you look at where you were in your 20s or your 30s, where you are now, having this incredible life experience, what's your philosophy? Your personal philosophy, Bill. That was a
Well,
long-winded question, but there you go.
yeah, I think the world is a troubled place, and I've seen war, and I've seen acts of God and of man that have left me brokenhearted, famine and poverty, and what happens when people clash and grab land and start wars. And I guess really my philosophy is just live and let live. And maybe another twist on that, love and let live. I mean, let's just give each other some grace. Why do
Well,
we have
now,
to be?
now, now, what else have you seen? I mean, you've seen those tough things. What are some of the amazing miracle things you've seen?
Well, honestly, I think that, in the book, The Big 100, some of the personalities I profile of people who live to extraordinary ages in the face of difficulties and personal tragedy and so forth, and we're still able to live a life of purpose.
Mm,
It's very inspiring to me.
So it's both. It's both, but I think as you're saying, through all that and through all what this woman went through who lived to 122, she still looked at the other side, at the positive, right? Because if we stay in that other side, then we can't move anywhere, correct? I mean, if you just looked at the tragedies that you saw and that's where you stayed, you wouldn't keep moving on in the same way. You'd just be looking for that
Yeah,
tragedy, if
absolutely.
you will.
I think, it's this is part of the downside and challenge of being a journalist is that a bit like being a police officer, you tend to see a lot of the dark, hairy underbelly of society, and you see bad things that can really leave you jaded. And I fight cynicism in my life, and
Yeah,
because I've seen a lot of pain on different continents, and I realize that, this world is a rough place.
yeah.
But we cannot allow those things to rob us of our joy. And
Mm.
I'm definitely an optimist by nature. I joke, but even my blood type is B positive.
Oh, cool. Well, it's interesting because I did this work very purposefully because I wanted to be more positive. And I mean, I had a strong upbringing and with, a good education and some really, really wonderful things. And then I had some things that had a lot of criticism and a lot of looking at what's wrong or what you did wrong, and a lot of that I think can be damaging for people. And I think when I went to school and got my education and then started working in guidance and counseling and realizing that I really wanted to show the foundation of things. How can we start from the beginning and teach people to be kinder? How can we look at things from a positive point of view? How can we do prevention? And 4 decades ago is when I started my first show on television called Positive People, and I'm still doing the exact same thing, Bill. I
Good
never
for you.
I didn't do broad journalism. I didn't work for an agency. I would go to places and say, "This is what I want to do." Most stations would say, "Oh, all right." Either they'd let me do it or sometimes I'd pay for airtime and find sponsors. But I really believed in this because I don't run, even though you'd say, "Oh, Patricia, you're amazing. You're so positive." I don't run positive. To be honest, it's full disclosure. I tend to run negative and I have to do self talk all the time. But because I've done this work for so many years, it doesn't take me that long, right? Because the
Right.
first thing will be, oh, and now it's, oh, wait a minute, Patricia, it's going to be just fine. And let's look at the upside. But I have those skills because I've taught them. And because of that, I've been able to help thousands of people, probably millions of people, to see that side, which is why I focus on these types of topics. So,
You
not
know,
to talk about me, but I mean, just wanted to share you the whole feeling of the attitude.
absolutely. And it's funny that you should say that because, these kinds of attitudes actually add years to our lives and life to our years. The research that I cover extensively in the book, The Big 100, shows that people who have an optimistic outlook live longer than pessimists do. Uh, One little study I'll mention that was done a couple of years ago out of Yale University looked at um, the correlation between people who have a positive outlook on their own aging journey and those who didn't. And the ones who really sort of looked with optimism at their future, even as an older person, lived 7 years longer than the group who, were kind of bummed out about getting older. And 7 years of life is more than what you would gain by watching your weight and cholesterol. So that's really pretty astounding.
Yeah,
And then there are other, yeah.
yeah. No, go ahead. It's such a great
Well,
conversation.
yeah,
Go ahead.
no, it's great. I mean, there's just I could talk for hours about this stuff. I find it really interesting. I mean, we do focus the genetics piece starts to take a larger role. By the time you get to, somebody like Jean Calment who lived to 122, it's almost entirely genetics at that point. But I always
Yeah.
tell people, Patricia, you can't live to 100 if you haven't lived to 90. And, getting to
Well,
90 in good shape is something you have control over.
right. But I think something you said that I want to bring out is it's not just one thing. So, for example, let's
Right.
say I eat well, I exercise, I sleep well, I'm around positive people, okay? All great things. And now I have a very destructive relationship with somebody who's always putting me down. That's going to take years off my life. So, I think we have to look at all of this that, it's not just,
Stress is the probably
yeah,
enemy number one of longevity, and so that's baked into what you just said too. I mean, if you're in that kind of a combative relationship, it's going to cause stress. You're going to have greater levels of cortisol released into your body. Inflammation will increase in your body, and it goes right down to the cellular level.
yeah,
It's one of the reasons why I exited the 24-hour news cycle and
yeah,
started writing books at this point in my
yeah,
life as
yeah,
a 64-year-old guy. Because I love the news business, but it's stressful. I mean, it's really, and you can only go so, that adrenaline and caffeine will only take you so far before you really burn out as a
yeah.
person.
No, no, I think it's so important. Let me ask you, we've got a few minutes to break. If people want to read your book, The Big 100, or they want to know more about your journalism, where do they go?
Well, they can go to billkolebooks.com, my website. It's Kole with a K, Kole, billkolebooks.com. And you can find ways to buy the book. It's certainly available on Amazon for those who are trying to give Jeff Bezos a little extra sidewalk these days. I always encourage people to go to their independent local bookstore. These are our treasures, and we need to help them succeed and flourish. But there are many ways to buy the book. It's published by Diversion Books in New York City.
Yeah, okay. And do you do any consultation or workshops or anything like that?
I've done lots of readings and a ton of media. I mean, this is a very interesting subject, and honestly, the book focuses on centenarians, but we are aging as a country by virtually every demographic, and it certainly in the last election cycle was front and center with the ages of the candidates and Joe Biden's rather spectacular decline in a fairly
Yeah,
short
yeah,
period. So there's a lot to talk about, lots to unpack here.
yeah. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more to Bill. Bill Kole is an award-winning reporter, editor, and former foreign correspondent who's reported from North America, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And he's been an AP correspondent in Paris, Amsterdam, and Vienna. He's covered international stories. He speaks 3 languages beside English. And his book is The Big 100, The New World of Super Aging. And let me tell you what Jane Goodall wrote about his book. What beautiful prose and a sense of fun. The Big 100 is stimulating and inspiring. And she's the founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and UN Messenger of Peace. So when we come back, we're going to talk to Bill. more about super aging, but some of the stories, some more stories that are in his book about these amazing people who live to 100, and maybe some of the things that he feels are most important that we can just do every day. I mean, hi, everyone, and we are back. We are back with Bill Kole, formerly William J. Kole, who is an award-winning reporter, editor, former foreign correspondent who's reported from North America, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. He was an AP correspondent based in Paris and Amsterdam and Vienna. He covered major international stories. And he retired in 2022 as an AP New England editor. He's a former fellow in aging journalism at Columbia University in New York and the National Press Foundation in Washington, D.C. His book is The Big 100, The New World of Super Aging. All right, so tell us about some super agers. Let's start with your grandmother, right? She lived till 104.
Just shy of 104. She was also a part, in addition to Jeanne Calment, the oldest person who ever lived, the
Yeah.
woman in France who lived to 122. The other person who inspired the book, The Big 100, was my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was born in 1899 and died in 2003,
Mm.
just shy of her 104th birthday, after a
Mm.
life that touched parts of 3 centuries, if
Mm.
you think about it, right? And she was really a dynamo, very positive, very upbeat. She actually, well, she was a pianist for the silent movies in the
Okay, there you
1920s.
go. Just pause for a minute. I want to tell you, people who are musicians, particularly conductors, there's been research that conductors will live a long time because they're just surrounded by this beauty with music. So I think
Yeah.
pianists fall into that. Go ahead. Go ahead,
Well, there
Bill.
you go. And incredible, right? And she, yeah, she was a toe dancer in New York,
Wow.
and just a really interesting person. And her stories were great. Again, just, some of these people who have achieved these extraordinary ages have had to overcome some obstacles, and my grandmother was no exception. She actually developed crippling arthritis, and she couldn't
Mhm.
play the piano anymore. So in the 70s, she put herself on an all natural food diet. She
Mhm.
avoided anything with artificial flavors or colors
Yeah.
and with preservatives, and she ate whole grains and did
Yeah.
all the things that we know now are these are no brainers for us in 2025, but when she was doing it, it was kind of cutting edge.
Oh, I
And she was
know.
a
Because I was doing it at that time and people thought we were all crazy.
Yeah, my mom would I mean my dad used to joke about his mother-in-law that she, what are you doing there, Marie, making bees knees or something like
Right.
that, just
Right.
but she cured her arthritis and she was able to
You
play the
did.
piano again. And at a family
Wow.
wedding, listen to this, Patricia, at a family wedding she was by then in her early 90s. She was out on the dance floor and she was kicking her foot up to my shoulder level, cutting up the dance floor. And so this is remarkable, absolutely inspiring, and so much fun to be around.
Did her daughter, your mother, how long did she live or is she still with us?
She's still with us. As we're talking, she's actually, unfortunately, getting some hospital treatment. But she's 94. She turned 94 in January. And up until a few months ago, she was living independently in the house I grew up in. In fact, I'm in that house
Wow.
right now talking to you because
Wow.
I could be nearby to visit her. But yeah, she's been, she spent a lot of time, taking exercise classes and taking care of her fitness and so forth. And of course, she also has those genes from her mom. So a winning combination. Sadly, I don't think my mom's going to make it to 100, but she may surprise us.
Yeah, isn't that? But in both these stories, and with the woman who lived to 122, you say a lot of the same things. The
Yeah,
attitude, the just keep going, the belief that, dealing with the arthritis, and the other woman who, dealt with the death of her son, and just moving on and believing there's a way. And
yeah,
it really, and as we said, it's also listening to yourself, not always to the medical people. Particularly in the 70s, the medical people would never tell her she could heal herself with food, with arthritis. Now there are people who would, but then that was really unusual. And she
right.
did it.
She did it, and and she she lived, an incredible life. And yeah, it's kind of neat to think about the interplay of mind and body, and these things really do affect. This is not, being meditating, breathing, trying to center yourself and get at peace with yourself and shed stress. All of these things have a tangible, effect on our heart rates, our blood pressure, our bodies, and so it's great. It's also, these are things, again, we talked earlier about the blue zones. These are
Yeah.
lessons we can learn from those people
Well,
who practice much of this.
and in the 70s and 80s, I don't think we were talking about this. And I think this is one of the reasons people are living longer too. Yes, we have all the breakthroughs, but people are now, I mean, we didn't teach people how to breathe and meditate and eat well, when I was growing up. I mean, you knew certain things, but we weren't having classes on positive thinking, right? Or good communication skills. And
Right.
now it's really now in companies they're teaching this. I teach a workshop on how to be civil in the workplace. Can you imagine? How to be respectful in the workplace. You would say to me, really? But because we're not, and those little things, that one little snide little comment that person makes, upsets that other coworker and they don't produce as much. And so that's what we're talking about. So, like you said, it's everything. It's the words we
Yeah,
use. It's just, it's really all of it together.
right. Absolutely.
So tell us another story. We have some time for another story.
Sure. Well, I want to tell you about Herlda Senhouse, who was an extraordinary centenarian I interviewed for the book, The Big 100, The New World of Super Aging. Herlda died just late last year at 113 years of age. She lived in Wellesley, Massachusetts, but she was an outlier because she was a Black woman. Um,
Mm,
I devote a whole chapter to the inequity that's sort of that we see in longevity. It's really disturbing. About 8 of every 10 centenarians are white. And,
mm,
white Americans on average live about 6 years longer than Black Americans do. And that really feels like a gap that we desperately need to close. And yet Herlda was able to overcome that. She grew up during Jim Crow. She endured a lot of stress. We talked about stress as toxic stress is the enemy of longevity. Um, and yet she had an incredibly optimistic and hopeful personality. I write in the book about how when I first stepped into her apartment, I heard giggling, and I looked around for a TV that might have been on, and there was no TV on. It was just Herlda, who was just delighted to see me, and this musical giggling sort of came out of her. And she didn't have dementia. She was sharp as a tack. I mean, she was really just a bubbly human being. Uh, Lovely person. She used to like to go play the slots at the casino outside Boston, and she went to church every Sunday. She had a big
mm.
social circle, and this is key for longevity is to avoid chronic loneliness.
Yeah. It's in when you were talked about her, I have to mention, people often ask me, of all the people I've interviewed, which has probably been over 5,000, who really stood out for me? And the person who stood out for me was Maya Angelou, an incredible African American woman. And let me tell you, her attitude, she was like Mother Teresa, Bill. I mean, she had not a mean bone in her body. Everything was love. And as a child, she had a lot of real difficulty. I don't think she
Hmm.
spoke until she was little, and she had some abuse. There was a lot there. And I know a journalist who knew her well, and he would visit her, and she would dress up for him. And she'd say, "Hello, Mr. Jones." And she would have the tea ready. And he'd say, "Miss Angelo, you look so beautiful. Well, I dressed up for you." I mean, she celebrated life. And I remember when I interviewed her twice. I was very lucky to have that opportunity. The first time, I just like shook afterwards. It was just amazing. I mean, she really believed love and light and just forgiveness. And she was a really very special person.
I think that's beautiful, and it really we need more people like this in our lives to spread that kind of light, and and that just feeds when you live like that, it not only benefits the people around you, but it benefits you yourself, and I love that. I love that story. You mentioned you were asking about people, extraordinary people. Another I profile in the book is Dr. Ephraim Engelman, who was a 104-year-old rheumatologist. He died in his office where he was still practicing in San Francisco, and he very deliberately never retired. He said that he always viewed retirement with great suspicion, and he thought that it was generally a big mistake to retire. So he was still, he was literally, in his boots when he passed away at his office. He was writing up some reports, still
Wow.
practicing medicine at 104 years old. There was a woman who just died a year ago, um, Julia Hawkins. Her nickname was Hurricane Hawkins. She was 105, and she was setting world records on the track in the 100-meter dash. Granted, she wasn't moving very quickly down the track, but by God, she was still doing it, at that incredible age. She was still competing. And, that, again, the inspiration is just off the charts, right?
So, Bill, we have like 4 minutes left. Having said everything you've just said in the last hour, what are your closing thoughts? What do you want to leave our listeners with? What's your message about the big 100, the new world of super aging?
I a lot of times I tell people, based on what we started out with, what's driving this longevity, the incredible medical breakthroughs and technological breakthroughs. I tell people, you might live to 100 whether you like it or not. And if you're, which is sort of a startling thing to say, but it's true. Think of those 5-year-olds. I've got two young grandsons. One of them statistically will live to 100. And, I think we need to look at that very seriously and try and sketch out the trajectory of a life like that. What do we want to do with all that extra time, all those bonus years? We really don't think much about the ending decades of our lives, but those could be the most beautiful and numerous years of our lives, actually, if this trend continues. So, it really is good to think about what we want to accomplish. And certainly our finances, we shouldn't ignore this, and we can't. We'll be in big trouble if we do. There's a lot to think about, but we really need to think about this. What's a 100-year life going to look like? What's my life story? What's the story that I imagine for myself in a century of living?
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to talk with you. It really was very inspirational, and we'll have to do
Pleasure,
it.
Patricia.
Thank you. Stay on the line for a minute. Bill Kole, and your website is?
BillKoleBooks.com. BillKole books.com.
Okay. All right. Stay on the line for a minute. All right, folks, that wraps up this edition of the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show. To find me, if you'd like a copy of my newsletter so you can see these incredible guests I have on each week, patricia@patriciaraskin.com, and you can write to me, or you can sign up on patriciaraskin.com. Also, if you'd like to get your amazing message out, I'm really help people because I've interviewed so many people. I help people get their message out through podcasts. So if you'd like to do your own podcast and you'd like me to kind of help you put it all together, like writing your book, please contact me, patricia@patriciaraskin.com. Remember, stay healthy, stay happy, get the support you need, and know you can make your dreams come true. Until next